How we doing, guys? Richie, the Jordan Patrick Show here. Wanted to talk about the happenings of Week 18, as well as Black Monday's results. As many of you know, week in and week out, leading up to the final 2 weeks of the regular season, many coaches are fired on a day known as Black Monday. This particular season, it was delayed a week, mainly because the NFL, for the first time ever, had a 17th week. But I want to hit on some of these names of some of the coaches that are going to be looking for new employment next year. We've got Matt Nagy of the Chicago Bears. He was fired after making the playoffs last season on a 500 record. Really nothing to see there, really no surprise. There have been some rumors that Sean Payton, originally from the Chicago area, who is the current New Orleans Saints coach, might have some interest there. But some time will reveal where that's going to end up going. We got the combination of Vic Fangio as well as his offensive coordinator out in Denver, Pat Shurmur, both getting fired. A lot of times when a head coach gets fired, some of the coordinators are guilty by association, so to speak, and that's part of the reason why Shurmur is gone as well. Shurmur is actually still on the books for the New York Giants being paid. And speaking of the New York Giants, Dave Gettleman, by all accounts, looks like he's going to retire and no longer be the GM there. Joe Judge has not been fired yet. There have been a lot of conflicting stories regarding the immediate future of Joe Judge. As of right now, he has not been fired. I'm going to touch on that towards the end of the show. But I would have to say that the biggest shocker here of coaches who were fired is undoubtedly head coach of the Miami Dolphins, Brian Flores. In a division where you have the New England Patriots, who are trending upward, and the Buffalo Bills, who are a legitimate Super Bowl contender, I really don't understand why Miami would want to fire this guy, considering that this is the second straight year that he had a winning season. Last year, they were a 10-win team that unfortunately didn't qualify for the playoffs. This year, they had to weather injuries, mainly of their quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, and they started off awful, 1-7, but to win 8 of your final 9 games, finish the season on a high note by beating your division rival, who's playoff bound, and to get fired the very next day, I do not understand the logic there. The only thing that I could think is that maybe, just maybe, they have intentions of possibly luring Jim Harbaugh out of the college game and bringing him back to the pros. He currently is at Michigan. Or maybe Sean Payton, another name that could be looking for a new address. I really can't justify that unless if that is ultimately the plan. Week 18 led to a lot of great games. A lot of things shaking out to see how the ultimate playoff picture would go. But last night's Raiders-Chargers game, undeniably a game for the ages. It involved the fate of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the fate of quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, because in the event that the game ended in a tie, Roethlisberger, who already announced that he is retiring at the end of the year, his career would have essentially ended. He was able to catch the breaks, which enabled him to get into a position that the final game of the year could essentially get the Steelers into the playoffs. Although it was in a losing effort, the effort of Justin Herbert last evening on multiple fourth down conversions and essentially getting the Raiders defense exhausted, running 18 straight offensive plays, ultimately culminating in a Mike Williams touchdown to end that drive and ultimately send the game into overtime, was nothing short of phenomenal. I think that Herbert has a great future, and he showed some greatness on that final drive. But I would have to say the most boneheaded move yesterday is as the overtime was winding down, and I had mentioned that if the game ended in a tie, Pittsburgh would miss the playoffs. It appeared that the Raiders were content with ending the game because, kicking a field goal is risky because if it gets blocked, the defense can run it back. Bad snap. A lot of things could go wrong. But when the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers decided to call a timeout, I think he was thinking ahead, maybe thinking icing the kicker. I don't think the Raiders had any real intentions of bringing on the kicking team. I think at that point, after just being flat out exhausted and happy to have the football, a tie would have essentially got both the Raiders and the Chargers into the playoffs, sent the Steelers home. Great seasons, great efforts sometimes come down to one play that can either take it away or one decision that could either take it away or lead you to the next step. And I was just blown away at that decision to call a timeout. And the Raiders ultimately kicked the field goal and sent their division rivals home. Raiders are going to be heading to Cincinnati. Definitely a winnable game, but it's going to be an interesting one to say the least. I'm just blown away at the decision to actually do that. I have no words for how silly that was. And if you're a player on that team, I don't know how they could even look at their coach and not want to go nuts. But Justin Herbert and Derek Carr alike put on a great show. Considering the way the NFL season ended last year when the Philadelphia Eagles laid down for draft position on a primetime game, which ended the season, I think that the NFL definitely needed a game to be that entertaining and to show how hard these guys were trying to make the playoffs. So in that regard, you got to tip your hat to both teams. They put on a hell of a show. Team that didn't put on a good show, though, the Indianapolis Colts, who a couple of weeks ago looked like a shoo-in to make the playoffs, and in a lot of people's minds were one of those teams that was a dark horse candidate to possibly run the table and make it to a Super Bowl behind the back of Jonathan Taylor, who in Derrick Henry's absence, in most people's minds, was the best running back in the NFL, especially down the stretch. Carson Wentz had a horrific day in Jacksonville. And really that final interception put them right out of any chance of coming back and winning the game. A heartbreaker for Indy on a lot of levels because I'm sure that they're going to look at the playoff brackets and say that, man, we're probably better than Pittsburgh. We might even be better than the Raiders. It's got to hurt. And they got to go back to the drawing board and figure out if Wentz is who they want to move forward with. Given the commitment that they made to him, I think that's going to be the decision. But definitely a terrible way to end a pretty good year, because when all you had to do was beat the worst team in the NFL to make the playoffs and to put up a stinker like that, going to be very hard for Indy to forget about for some time. But, that's why they play the games. Sometimes you have a team that has just been nothing short of horrendous, and they just don't get it done when it didn't count all year. But in the final week, they can play spoiler, and that is exactly what the Jacksonville Jaguars did. I'm sure the namesake of our show, Mr. Jordan Patrick, has got to be happy about that. It's always good to see your team beat a division rival no matter what week it is. I'm going to give you a short-ended version of a playoff preview. Jordan and myself are going to be going in on the playoff brackets tomorrow on our show, so I don't want to really divulge too deep in them, but I'm going to let you guys know what the matchups are after everything shaked out yesterday. Out in the AFC, the Tennessee Titans earned the 1 seed, which is impressive considering that Derrick Henry was injured. It remains to be seen if he's going to be back for their first playoff game in 2 weeks, but I have a feeling that they're going to do their best to get him out there. The defending AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs will be hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers in potentially Ben Roethlisberger's final game. Buffalo Bills will be playing the New England Patriots for the third time in less than 2 months. That is going to be a very exciting game. Could go either way. The Bengals, who have not been a playoff visitor for quite some time, are home, and they're going to be playing the Las Vegas Raiders. Another game that could really go either way. And I think the cool thing about Super Wildcard Weekend is that you are most likely to see upsets that week because a lot of evenly matched teams, and with no longer having a 2 seed getting a bye anymore, everybody's vulnerable, and it only takes a bad 3 hours to lose a football game. So I think it definitely evens out the field for some teams that might have had better seasons than the team they're playing. Out in the NFC, Green Bay Packers. They have home field advantage for the second straight year. So the road runs through Lambeau in order to get to the Super Bowl. Defending world champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will be playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas Cowboys and the 49ers in Arlington will be reigniting a very famous rivalry from the 90s and even going back to the 80s and 70s. That's going to be a hell of a game. Los Angeles Rams and the Arizona Cardinals are going at it. Rams won the West. Cardinals were in first for most of the year, but after losing DeAndre Hopkins, their offense struggled mightily. I do believe D-Hop's going to be active for that game, and I think it's going to be a great one. So basically, Wild Card Weekend should live up to the hype, and I think we've got some great games to look forward to. As I already said, Jordan and I are going to go in on that tomorrow. I would have to say that out of the wild card matchups I already talked about, the LA Rams have to be disappointed because they went from being the 2 seed and playing, in my opinion, a weak Eagles team to now dropping and having to play a dangerous Cardinals team, a Cardinals team that on any given week can beat somebody, led by a very dynamic quarterback, Kyler Murray, and there's a familiarity with them being in the same division. I do believe that that can go either way. So the Rams definitely cannot be pleased with how their season ended, their regular season. We'll see how that shapes up. Wanted to hit on a final thought. As many of you know, I am a diehard New York Giants fan. I've seen a lot of coaches get fired today. One particular one who I don't believe should have been fired in Brian Flores. Others that I think were on the way out and should have been fired, like Nagy, like Zimmer. I'm kind of indifferent on what I think about Fangio. I think that could have won either way. Since firing Hall of Fame coach Tom Coughlin, 2-time Super Bowl winning coach Tom Coughlin, and since firing 2-time Super Bowl winning GM Jerry Reese, the New York Giants have been an NFL worst in terms of their win-loss record, even to the team that they share a stadium with, the New York Jets. The consensus around the league has been that Dave Gettleman is likely going to be fired, or retired is the terminology that they used. I'm a little taken back that he gets to have a decent send-off when he didn't do anything for the organization as the GM. Whereas Jerry Reese, on the other hand, was fired before the end of the season. And I'm no Jerry Reese fan, but it is strange that the treatment was very different. Reese had more success. Bigger issue on my mind is the immediate future of Joe Judge. It's not common when you get a rookie head coach that you give him 5 years. In the Giants' case, that's what they did. Even if you look at what the New York Yankees did in baseball, giving Aaron Boone 3 years. I mean, granted, they re-upped his contract. That's been a little controversial amongst Yankee fans. But the point is, with a first-time manager, first-time head coach, it's rare that you're going to get a big commitment from the organization past 3 years. And now the Giants are in a situation where they either clean house, because Joe Judge has been the ongoing joke of the NFL season. And I myself will admit that I was a little wrong about him. Last year, the Giants defense was ranked 11th in the league, and they were trending upward. This year, unfortunately, more times than not, Joe Judge has been outcoached, he's been outworked, and he looks like he's in over his head. I feel that when you're trying to change the culture of a football team, you cannot extract one part and not the other. When they fired Tom Coughlin, they didn't get rid of Jerry Reese. I don't believe that when you're trying to change things, you leave one part of what was going wrong. And in my opinion, Coughlin wasn't doing too much wrong. That's another conversation. But as far as the here and now goes, if the Giants don't fire Joe Judge, there's going to be a lot of backlash from the Giant faithful. One of the most iconic organizations in football had a lot of empty seats yesterday. And I think that was the fan base trying to send a message to majority owner John Mara that this is unacceptable and things ultimately have to change. I've said this before. I hope the Giants bring in somebody from outside of the organization. I think Mara's way of thinking is rather outdated. In professional sports, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make bad hires. But I think that by not admitting the flaws of it, you're compounding the problem. And I think at this point, the Giants have to cut their losses. And even if it's financially hurtful to pay a man that's not going to be coaching the team for the next 3 years, I think it's something the Giants have to do. A couple of things to play devil's advocate on my own thought of why they would retain him is the simple one. They don't want to pay two head coaches when only one's coaching the team. And I would probably say that the other reason is that they can look back on their schedule and say that we were missing X, Y, and Z on offense, which is a fact. I believe if quarterback Daniel Jones didn't go down for the final month and a half of the season, the Giants may have won 6 or 7 games. Not that it's something to celebrate, but then when you look at the 3-point losses that they had early in the year to the Chiefs, the Falcons, like a very close loss to the Washington football team, then you can start talking into a rationale that maybe they're not as bad as their record. I watch the Giants every week. They are as bad as their record. I've never seen a more inept offense of the Giants in all my years of being a fan. I do think that hitting rock bottom could be a blessing, but it's only a blessing if you acknowledge as an owner that you failed the fan base and that you failed some of your former players, particularly a guy like a Eli Manning or even your current quarterback, Daniel Jones. The man that he hired promised hog mollies, essentially monsters that were going to be pushing shit around on the offensive line. In his 4 years, that has not materialized. And while I do think he drafted better or acquired better talent via free agency on the defensive side of the ball, it's a quarterback-driven league. And if your offense can't move the ball, I don't care if you have the 85 Bears, you're going to lose a lot of games because the defense ultimately will get tired. That's all I got for today, guys. I'm going to keep my eyes peeled to see if Joe Judge does indeed get fired, but I'll be lying if I say that I think he is. Gettleman's gone. Giants going to hire a new GM. And as a fan, I'm going to keep my eyes definitely on what's happening there. But the New York Giants are in a very sad place. Very iconic organization, third most championships in league history. But right now, they don't resemble any of what their great lineage has portrayed all these years. So I am out for now. Looking very forward to tomorrow, getting that show out with our host, Jordan. It's going to be a great time. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, guys. Take care.